Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has turned down a proposal by Aboriginal leaders to consult the community regarding their recognition in the country's constitution. The country hopes to change its founding document and give its original inhabitants, the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, and give them recognition in the constitution which first came into effect in 1901. Although Prime Minister Abbott has promised a referendum, due to be held in 2017, to recognise Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders as the first Australians, his refusal to allow Aboriginal leaders to hold meetings on how to move towards recognition first has angered the community. Arguing in a letter published in the Australian newspaper on Tuesday that allowing Aboriginal leaders to hold Indigenous-only meetings will only create a log of claims, Prime Minister Abbott also added, "A separate Indigenous process jars with the notion of finally substituting we for them and us. I am in favour of building consensus, but strongly believe that this should be a national consensus in favour of a particular form of recognition rather than simply an Indigenous one," the Australian Premier said. Currently, Aboriginals are not mentioned in the Australian Constitution and no treaty has been signed with them. However, the Constitution contains two race provisions allowing states in Australia to prevent citizens from voting on the basis of their ethnicity, as well as allowing state authorities to formulate race-specific laws. Australian Senator Nova Paris, who is the first female Aboriginal to be elected to Parliament, demanded in a speech on Sunday that the Australian government first acknowledges its racist past before recognising the Aboriginal community. "You can only move forward when you acknowledge the truth, and right now this country has a problem with the truth of Aboriginal people," Paris said at an Indigenous festival in the Northern Territory, according to the BBC. "Every time we come out and tell our story, it's like shut the book, we don't want to deal with it," she said. Speaking at the same festival, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Social Justice Commissioner Mick Gooda called on the Australian government to engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people respectfully. Aboriginal lawyer Patrick Dodson also stressed the need for Aboriginal Australians to hold their own discussions on complicated matters. "Until you can get something that is consensual, it is very difficult to give them comfort to a proposition that may or may not have their support," he told National Indigenous Television, NITV. Last month, Australia's ruling and opposition party leaders met with Indigenous leaders in Sydney to find a solution to a constitutional issue that has been described by Prime Minister Tony Abbott as an echoing silence. According to the latest polls, the Australian public overwhelmingly back the recognition of the Aboriginal population, with the latest survey carried out by the Sydney Morning Herald Monday putting support at a record of 85%. Around 500,000 Aborigines live in Australia today, almost half the number that existed when British were settled in the island in 1788. Australia's population is now 23 million. In 2008, then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd apologised for the mistreatment of Aboriginals in the federal parliament. The Australian Parliament formally recognised Indigenous people as the country's first inhabitants 2 years ago, but changing the constitution requires harder work.